The voice was calm. Not loud. Not desperate. Calm. That was the first thing Evenson Joseph, 28 years old, noticed in the darkness. And it made no sense at all. On January 12, 2010, at 4:53 p.m., the earth beneath Port-au-Prince, Haiti, snapped like dry bone. Buildings folded in on themselves. Streets cracked open. Screams rose and were suddenly cut short. Evenson was not a hero. He wasn't a pastor, a rescuer, or a man of influence. He was an ordinary young man helping inside a concrete building near Delmas when the walls collapsed without warning. In less than 6 seconds, the world ended. When he opened his eyes, there was no light, no sound, except his own breathing, shallow and fast. A slab of concrete pressed against his chest. Another pinned his legs. Dust filled his mouth. Every breath burned. He tried to scream. Nothing came out. Around him, the building had become a grave. Minutes passed, or hours. Time lost its meaning underground. Evenson listened for movement, footsteps, voices, anything. At first, there were screams, then coughing, then prayers whispered by strangers he would never see. One by one, the sounds disappeared. Silence took over. The air grew hot, thick, limited. Evenson realized something terrifying. No one knew he was alive. He counted his breaths to stay calm. He tried to move a finger. Failed. Panic rose like a wave, threatening to drown him. That's when it happened. In the absolute darkness, when his mind began to slip, a voice spoke. Not outside, not echoing through rubble. Inside. Stay still, it said. Slow, gentle, certain. Evenson froze. He wasn't hallucinating. At least, it didn't feel like one. The voice didn't beg, didn't rush. It didn't sound afraid. It sounded steady, as if someone else could see what he couldn't. Tears filled his eyes. He hadn't cried during the collapse, but now, buried alive, with death pressing from every side, he felt something unfamiliar. Not hope. Guidance. Above him, Port-au-Prince burned. Below the rubble, Evenson listened, unaware that this moment would change not only whether he lived, but who he would become if he survived.
The calm voice didn't speak again right away. That was almost worse. Evenson Joseph lay trapped beneath the concrete, every muscle screaming for movement he could not make. The pressure on his chest turned each breath into a negotiation. Inhale, shallow. Exhale, slower. Dust coated his tongue like chalk. He tried to remember the last normal thing he had done that day. January 12, 2010. He had laughed. He had complained about the heat. He had made plans for the weekend. None of that belonged to him anymore. The darkness pressed closer, not physically, mentally. His thoughts began to fracture. At times he was certain he heard rescuers. At others he knew he was alone. Then the voice returned. Breathe with me. Not a command, an invitation. Evenson focused on it, letting his breathing slow to the rhythm he felt more than heard. In, out, in, out. The panic that had been clawing at his chest loosened its grip. Something strange happened. The pain didn't disappear, but fear did. Hours passed, or maybe an entire night, Evenson lost count when the thirst began. His lips cracked, his throat burned, his stomach twisted into itself. Above him, the city was chaos, but he didn't know that yet. He didn't know that over 200,000 people were already dead, or that entire neighborhoods had vanished. All he knew was that the voice stayed. Sometimes it spoke in short phrases. Don't move yet. Wait. Help is closer than you think. Other times it said nothing, but Evenson felt watched, not in a threatening way, in a protective one. At one point, a tremor shook the rubble, a terrifying aftershock. Concrete shifted, dust rained down. Evenson screamed, sure this was the moment it would all end. The voice spoke instantly. Still. He obeyed. Seconds later, a slab that might have crushed him slid past his head and locked into place inches away. If he had moved even slightly, he would have died. That realization broke something inside him. Evenson began to whisper, not prayers exactly, but thoughts, gratitude, regret, names of people he loved, apologies to people he had ignored. For the first time in his life, he wasn't asking for survival. He was asking to be spared for a reason. And somewhere above the rubble, faint and distant, a sound reached him. Metal. Voices. Not close, but real. At first, Evenson thought the noise was another trick of the mind. After being buried for so long, his senses had begun to betray him. The brain, desperate for hope, invents things. He knew that, or at least he thought he did. But this sound was different. It wasn't inside his head. It came from above. Metal scraping against stone, a dull thud, then voices, muffled, distant, real, human voices. Evenson's heart slammed against the concrete, pinning his chest. He tried to shout. Nothing came out. His mouth was too dry, his lungs too weak. Panic surged again, stronger than before. What if they passed by? What if they searched the wrong section? What if the noise faded? The voice spoke. Save your strength. Evenson clenched his eyes shut, tears slipping into the dust. The calm certainty of that presence was the only thing keeping him from breaking apart. Minutes crawled by. The sound stopped. Silence returned, heavier than ever. Evenson felt something inside him collapse. This was it, the last chance, gone. Then suddenly, a sharp knock, deliberate, repeated. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random debris. It was a signal. Hope exploded inside his chest, painful and overwhelming. With everything he had left, Evenson forced air through his throat and struck the concrete near his hand, producing the faintest response. Tap, tap. Above him, the knocking stopped. Then came shouting, louder this time, in French, then Creole, then English. They were calling out for survivors. Evenson tried to answer again. His voice cracked, barely more than a breath, but this time it was heard. The rescuers began digging. Hours passed as rubble was carefully removed. Every movement risked collapse. Every mistake could kill him. At one point, a rescuer's flashlight pierced the darkness. A thin beam of light cut across Evenson's face. He sobbed. One of the men froze. "There's someone alive," he said, quietly, as if death might hear. They worked through the night. Evenson drifted in and out of consciousness, held together by the steady reassurance of voices above. And through it all, the calm voice remained. Not louder, not prouder, just present.
When the final slab was lifted, a rescuer reached down and took Evenson's hand. At that exact moment, the moment human fingers touched his skin, the calm voice spoke one last time. "You're not alone anymore." Then it was gone. Evenson was pulled into the light after nearly 2 days buried alive. But survival was only the beginning.
The daylight hurt. When Evenson Joseph was pulled from the rubble, the sun over Port-au-Prince felt unreal, too bright, too normal for a world that had just ended. His eyes struggled to adjust as hands lifted him onto a stretcher. Around him, the city was unrecognizable. Buildings lay flattened like broken toys. Smoke drifted through the air. People wandered the streets in shock, calling out names that would never be answered. Evenson was rushed to a makeshift medical camp. His body was dehydrated, bruised, and fractured, but alive, against odds that no one could fully explain. Doctors told him later that most people trapped as long as he was didn't survive. Lack of air, internal injuries, panic. Evenson listened quietly. He didn't tell them about the voice. At night, in the crowded tent filled with the injured and the grieving, sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back under the concrete, chest pinned, breath limited, darkness endless. But something had changed. Fear no longer owned him. Instead, there was a weight inside his chest, not pain, responsibility. Over the next days, Evenson learned the numbers, the dead, the missing, the families erased in seconds. He learned that several people who had been trapped near him had not made it. Some were rescued just meters away, too late. The randomness of it haunted him. Why me became a question he could not escape. He replayed the moment of rescue again and again, the flashlight, the hands, the voice fading away. He tried to explain it logically, stress, oxygen deprivation, the mind creating comfort. But the voice had known things. It had warned him not to move. It had calmed him before aftershocks. It had stayed when others' screams disappeared. One afternoon, still weak, Evenson noticed an elderly woman in the camp struggling to drink water. Her hands shook violently. No one was watching. Without thinking, he stood, ignoring the pain, and helped her. Then another person asked for assistance. Then another. By nightfall, Evenson was moving slowly through the camp, offering water, listening to stories, holding hands. He realized something unsettling. The same calm he had felt under the rubble now flowed through him. Not dramatic, not loud, quiet, steady, present. He understood then. Whatever had stayed with him in the darkness had not rescued him from the world. It had rescued him for it.
Evenson Joseph left the medical camp weeks later with scars that never fully healed. Some were visible, fractures that ached when the rain came. Others stayed hidden, carried quietly, like the memory of darkness pressing against his chest. He returned to what was left of his neighborhood in Port-au-Prince, still in 2010, still surrounded by loss. Friends were gone, familiar streets erased. Life as he had known it no longer existed. But Evenson did, and that alone felt heavy. At night he waited for the voice to return. It didn't. Days passed, weeks, months. At first the silence disappointed him. Then he understood. It was never meant to stay with him. It was meant to move through him. Evenson began volunteering with local aid groups, helping distribute food and water. He wasn't strong, he wasn't trained. He was simply present, listening to grief, offering patience where panic once lived. People noticed. They said he had a calming presence, that when he spoke, others slowed down, that fear softened around him. He never told them why. Years later, when asked in an interview about how he survived being buried for nearly 2 days, Evenson answered carefully. "I was guided," he said. "Not rescued, not saved. Guided." He didn't attach a name to it.
He didn't turn it into doctrine or belief. He only described what he felt, a mercy that arrived when logic had run out. The earthquake took nearly everything from Haiti, but it gave Evenson Joseph something he never had before: purpose. Today, he still lives simply, still an ordinary man by every external measure, but those who know him closely say the same thing. When things fall apart, when fear closes in and there seems to be no way out, Evenson is the one people look for. Because he listens, because he stays calm, because once, buried beneath the earth on January 12, 2010, when death was certain and hope was unreasonable, someone spoke softly to him in the dark. And now, in a broken world, still learning how to breathe again, he has become that voice for others.